This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore.
We are back with another dual episode with the lovely, talented, and scholarly Brittany Page and Dum Dum McGee, me. Last time, well, first of all, we're going to talk a lot about this new developments in this Brett Favre Mississippi story. In this particular case, as you know from the thumbnail and the description, Brett Favre was soliciting prison labor, slave labor, to build the $5 million or the volleyball stadium he did get $5 million of welfare funds. They were misdirecting monies that were going to go to the neediest people in the neediest state to build his daughter's volleyball gym at her college. But not only that, he wanted prison labor to do so, and there's text messages. But before we get to that, last time on the show, you well know that I have been diagnosed with colon cancer, and I'm very soon going to be going through surgery, and there will be a time of convalescence. There'll be a time of recovery after that surgery. And because YouTube is my job, YouTube is our job, as well as the podcast, Brittany is going to step in for me, and we wanted some acclimation time for you to get used to her. And you might prefer her over me. So maybe that's a little fear, a little insecurity within me. But last time on the show, when I had her introduce herself, there wasn't a lot of explanation as to who she is. A lot of people know that we host a podcast together. A lot of people know Brittany is my wife. But they were bummed that they didn't get any more biographical stuff about Brittany. So without further ado, Brittany, introduce yourself to the audience.
Okay. Well, first, I'm dressing like you, so I'm trying to really take on the role,
Twitters.
Take it seriously. Okay. Aside from that, yes, I host the I Doubt It podcast with Jesse. Have been doing that since 2014, I believe. 2014.
March 11th, 2014.
That's the exact date that I don't remember, but good for Jesse. And yeah, I have a Master of Science in Clinical Psychology. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of California, as well as here in Washington, D.C. You might be thinking, a therapist who talks about politics, that seems strange. I don't think it's strange. Therapy is political, and I think it's important for therapists to be active with social justice activism to try to make the world better for those issues that people bring into the therapy room. So that's important.
And all of that starts with politics.
Yes.
Yeah.
And improving health policy and public policy. So that is my educational background. As far as my political awakening, I guess we could say, I was raised in a white supremacist household in Idaho. My parents moved us from California to Idaho to be closer to Aryan nations when I was a child. And so I grew up in a radical right-wing white supremacist cult.
And that is probably going to be shocking to many people. If you want to know more about that, Brittany was just recently on a podcast called Embrace the Void, hosted by our good friend Aaron Rabinowitz. If you'd like to learn more about Brittany's journey and into and then out of virulent white supremacy, go listen to that episode 250 of Embrace the Void. The link will be in the description below. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so because of that background, I have a particular interest in Christian nationalism and the white supremacy that is popping up all over the right now. Very common.
Yeah, so if you have other questions, leave them for the lovely, talented, and scholarly Brittany Page down in the comments, and we can discuss all of those matters then. And we appreciate you guys very much. Let's talk about this story. This is an alarming misuse. Isn't really doing it justice. Republicans oftentimes talk about, as they're waving their constitutions in the air, they talk about lower taxes and being good stewards of the taxpayers' money. And this is exactly the kind of thing that takes place when you give Republicans unfettered control of the government. They misuse the money because they disrespect the poor so much. They respect the rich and disrespect the poor so much that this is the thing that begins to happen.
And there's a battle brewing right now with the former governor of Mississippi, Phil Bryant, who is trying really hard to stay out of the fray, where charges have already been filed for a nonprofit founder, Nancy New, in Mississippi. And the governor, Phil Bryant's appointed welfare director, John Davis, who pled guilty this week to state and federal charges for this welfare fraud scheme. So you have two people brought up on charges, John Davis, Nancy New, and they are working with the government. And Governor Phil Bryant, Brett Favre, getting scared because of this. And so Phil Bryant going on the offensive here, according to reporting from Mississippi, attempting to shield further texts from being released. Now, according to this reporting, reading from the article, former Governor Phil Bryant has publicly produced dozens of text messages in an attempt to prove he was unaware that former NFL quarterback Brett Favre was using welfare money for his volleyball project. The court documents filed Friday come within a court battle between Bryant and the attorney for nonprofit founder Nancy New over whether Bryant should have to produce any more of his communication regarding the welfare-funded volleyball stadium. In response to a state civil complaint against her, New alleged in July that she had the approval and direction from the governor and other welfare officials to make the allegedly illegal purchases. Bryant now objects to turning over any more records that New's attorney has subpoenaed in order to argue New's defense.
And why would he not want his text messages out there? It's because they are going to implicate him. There needs to be more accountability, more consequence, and more prosecutions in this case, because people's lives were absolutely negatively impacted because the $5 million that went to the volleyball court wasn't available for the neediest people, again, in the neediest state in the union. We went through last time, I believe it was last week, on this show with Brittany, and we went through the numbers that Mississippi is number 50, number 48, number 43, all these different metrics where they're at the bottom of the barrel. And rather than use money that had been federally allocated to give to the poorest, the most needy, the most desperate in the state, they used it for a guy who's worth $100 million, according to Celebrity Net Worth and other goofy celebrity rich sites. $100 million. It's just gross.
And this is increased pressure on former Governor Phil Bryant. It's also increased pressure on Brett Favre. Brett Favre, like we've talked about, the nonprofit, Nancy New's nonprofit, paid Brett Favre $5 million for the volleyball construction for his daughter at his daughter's university, and also paid him directly $1.1 million. Like Jesse is saying, this is part of an overall total of $77 million that came from the Federal Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. So they are taking money directly from the pockets of people who desperately need these funds and using it for Brett Favre's little pet project.
Yeah, they talk so much about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and that welfare should be a trampoline and not a hammock and all of these just worthless tropes that mean nothing. But when you have an opportunity to give someone that help, that helping hand so they can help themselves out, it's being squandered by $100 millionaire Brett Favre, Phil Bryant, who's also in his own right a rich guy. They are misappropriating, they are stealing money, taxpayer dollars for stupid things. And this, look, listen, it should not escape you the racial implications here. Because while Mississippi is roughly 38 or 39% black, and we're going to get into this prison thing, the prison population is wildly larger than the general population of black people in Mississippi. The jails, 57% of the jails are filled with black people. And the prisons, 62% of the prison population in Mississippi is black. While again, remember, 38% of the state is. That is fodder for a video of its own. But the fact that Brett Favre, and I'm going to read from this Mississippi Today article, Brett Favre wanted prison labor, not wealthy enough to actually donate some money to have members of a union go in, they're skilled in this trade to build. He wanted prisoners to do it for free. Later, in May of 2018, Favre reached out again to Governor Bryant for help constructing lockers for the facility. Quote, "I'm still trying to save money on the volleyball facility," Favre texted. Favre even suggested the prison industry, possibly as a builder. Quote, unquote, "the prison industry possibly as a builder," said Brett Favre. Gross.
Relying on prison labor to build his volleyball stadium. Not only stealing money from the neediest families in Mississippi, but then also wanting to exploit human beings to build the volleyball stadium. I mean, and this isn't the first time that prison was mentioned in these text messages, by the way. Phil Bryant is trying to say, listen, I had no idea about this scheme with my former appointed welfare director, John Davis, and Brett Favre and Nancy New. I had no idea, even though he's continuously mixing it up with these people in the text messages. At one point, he texted Brett Favre. This was in September 2019. He says, "We are going to get there. This was a great meeting." And this was a meeting he was describing with the individual who replaced the guy who just pled guilty, John Davis. And he said, "We will have to follow the law. I am too old for federal prison." Smiley face, sunglasses, emoji.
That is an admission that they knew what they were doing was not just wrong, but criminal. You don't make jokes with friends about dinner plans or whatever, about, I don't want to go to federal prison, because there's nothing criminal there. But when you're doing something that is clearly illegal, clearly misappropriating funds, you know it's illegal, and you're making federal prison jokes.
You know, Jesse, weren't you mistaken for Brett Favre one time?
Funny story. Actually, the only celebrity I've ever been mistaken for, we should end it here. This is perfect. That's a great, perfect, beautiful, wonderful.
Were you trying to steal money from needy families? Is that when you got mistaken?
I wasn't. Let me tell you the story. Okay. So I walk into the prison/welfare theft store and no. So I had a friend who ran a car dealership in the town I lived in. And here in the Washington, D.C. area, this was many years ago. And I was going to meet him for lunch, and one of the salesmen came out to sell me a car. I had a hat, I was a little scruffy, and he started acting really weird and like with all this deference and walking backwards and like, yes, sir, yes, sir. And so I'm just here to meet X friend, I will leave him unnamed. And when finally the guy came out to go to lunch with me, he was laughing. And I was like, what's up? He goes, that kid thinks you're Brett Favre. I don't see it. One,
I can see it.
I don't steal from welfare people, and I certainly don't want to commit human rights abuses by treating prisoners like slaves. But I don't think I look that much like him. Maybe more now today because I got a little gray going on. But I'm bigger than him. He's 6'2", I'm 6'3". So
ooh.
It's an ocean of difference. It's a whole inch. So that's it.
Yeah.
Anyway, all of this stuff, links to the things we're referencing, will be down in the description. I would encourage you to go through all of this. If you live in Mississippi, it's time to get to the polls. It's time to get your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, your family to vote, to get them aware of what is going on. Because even if they're conservative and they truly say that they believe in good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, this should outrage them. That welfare dollars are being spent on volleyball courts and lockers, and prisoners are being misused. It's all a bit much. You can call, leave us a voicemail, 714-576-4054. Of course, you can email daily@dollemore.com. We'd love to hear from you. And you can follow us on social media. I am at Dollemore, just about everywhere.
And I am at Brittany E. Page on Twitter and Instagram.
And if you appreciate what we do, you want to take part in the mission of this program, you can click the join button below. Become a channel member for as little as $1.99 a month, or you can click on over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt which does not just support the podcast. It absolutely does support the podcast, but not only, it also supports the work that we do here. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, go check out that episode with Brittany Page on Embrace the Void. and we'll see you next time. Until then, be genuine. Take care of one another.